Hi, everybody. Let me just give a few seconds longer for other people to join in. Hi, Marina. Hi, Judith. Hi, Taria. Hi, Heide. And anyone else who's joining in? Marina. Did I already say that? Okay. Can everybody see me? You can type in the, let me see if I can make it just, well, I don't know how to make it just mine so that everybody doesn't have to be seen if they don't want to be seen. Anyway, welcome to, hi David. Let's see, our second to last class. I think there's 2 classes left. We've gone over a lot of artists, and today we're going to talk about Gilbert, Stuart, and Kehinde, Wiley. And I feel like this could be a little bit of a controversial topic, depending on how you feel politically about certain presidents. So I just want to stress that we keep it about the art more than however we feel about specific presidents that we may or may not be talking about today. And luckily, we're not talking about anyone who is currently president. So we are looking at the paintings, presidential paintings, and as most of you know, here if you go to, where did it go? To participants, you can always put a thumb up or a thumb down, or you can type in a question in comments if you have any questions along the way. So Gilbert Stuart, you may or may not have heard of him. He is the one of the most famous presidential painters, and I'm sure you've seen his paintings because he painted the most paintings of George Washington. He was born in Rhode Island on December 3rd in 1755, and he died in Boston, Massachusetts. He had a wonderful career, and he was very well known for his portraits. He painted several presidents that we will look at today, and most notably George Washington. His work is known for being able to really capture the essence of the person with a very true likeness while still somehow capturing their character. He also had a very brush-like quality to his paintings. They're looser in areas, and then they tighten up in the areas of the face. But that was something that is a little bit newer to the style of the time in the 1700s. So this is the handout that you get every week, and this just talks a little bit about his life. One thing is his dad owned a snuff mill, so he was very addicted to that stuff, and he did some of his earliest training with Cosmo Alexander, and he ended up in Massachusetts and in DC for a long time, painting the portraits of the presidents once it became Washington, DC. Then the artist of today, the living artist, is Kehinde Wiley. You may have seen the portrait that he painted of Barack Obama last couple years ago, or was it last year, 2 years ago? I'm not sure. It came out, and either way, we're gonna look at it right now. And he is a Los Angeles-born artist. He currently lives in New York City, but he has 3 studios. He's become so famous. He has one in New York, one in Beijing, and one or somewhere in, we have no sound. Okay. Can everybody hear me? There's no sound? Let's see. Does anyone else not have sound? Can you put your thumb up if you can hear me? Okay. David, you can't hear me? Oh dear. All right, let's see. Remote control. Can anyone? Can you please message back if you can hear me or not, because I don't know if it's just Mount Miguel or if it's just or if it's everyone. Okay, so Taria can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay. Judy,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I'm gonna, okay, Marina's on mute. Am I on mute? No, I'm not on mute. Judith, David, Heide, let's see. Oopsie. Sneaky, okay. All right, I'm gonna keep going because it looks like everyone else can hear me. So Mount Miguel, that might be something on your end. Not sure what's going on. Okay, so Kehinde Wiley is a LA-born artist, 1977, grew up with a mother who really loved education and who taught him a lot about art history. And this is what becomes really important in his for his career, because what he really is known for is he takes elements from traditional paintings, old master paintings, and he has put new modern people in those paintings instead. And so in most of the cases, it's African-American men who are living and working in New York City, and since then he's expanded it from there. But what happened is he was living in LA, he grew up with his mother who taught him a lot about art education. He ended up at a very young age studying art, and then he became pretty well known, and he went to New York City, and he went to Yale, again, another one from Yale. So I find it very strange that pretty much everyone who I've talked about this semester is from Yale. It's very interesting to me. So I've always known that Yale, they have a huge pull in the art world, but it's just becoming more and more prevalent the more that I research all of these artists. Anyway, so he went to Yale, and then he got into the Studio Museum in Harlem, and that is a museum only for African-American artists. And what they do is they show, they give, I think, 4 residencies a year to, you have to be African-American descent of some sort to get in. So he was living in Harlem, he's walking down the street, and he starts, he's taking pictures of just regular men on the street, living their lives, and he says, hey, you know, can I take your picture and do a painting of it? And he ends up inserting these figures into historical reference paintings. So we'll go into that a little more, but that's how he really gained a following, is by bringing people from today, everyday life, and putting them into an art historical painting. So let's look at some paintings. Let's see, did that get figured out with Mount Miguel? Let me know if it did. Okay. Okay, so here's our first, this is what caught my eye, and the reason that we're doing this group of work is because Gilbert Stuart painted George Washington, and Kehinde Wiley painted, this is the presidential portrait for the National Gallery of Portraits of where all the presidents go. And Kehinde Wiley's sticks out sort of like a sore thumb. I think the only one that is quite a bit different is, I believe, Elaine de Kooning painted, I'm drawing a blank on his name, in the 70s. Anyway. I'll think of it and send it out to you when you see it. So these paintings, you can see here, first of all, they're traditional and also non-traditional. Here we have, if you think of the 1700s at the time, what Gilbert Stuart is doing, he has these tighter strokes going on in here and much looser strokes on the outside. And you can also notice by the lace how he keeps things, elements of mark making without being completely photorealistic. So you can often see that on the collar and the type of I don't know what you call this piece of material here, but you can often see things that distinguish Gilbert Stuart's work by some of these qualities, and the looser paintbrush strokes, and then more realistic painting on the face. Another thing that we notice about these paintings is the likeness. I mean, I don't know specifically what George Washington looks like, but according to sources, these paintings look very much like George Washington, and they really capture his essence. Then if you look over here, this painting is very controversial. I don't know if you followed this at all when it came out, but some people love it, some people hate it. It's not your traditional painting. He's sitting on a chair with it's not just a portrait, his whole body is in the painting. And he considers you'll see a lot of these flowering elements that come in the back, and he says those are merely an element that is iconic of art history to have some sort of floral background. But in this case, he does things like put some of the leaves in front of the figure and in front of the chair. And in some of the older paintings, they were more like wallpaper, and you'll see that. But here we have sort of the background mingling with the foreground. So I just want you to think about these two portraits and how different they are, and also how similar they are. They're both portraits, and the theme is portraits. And in this case specifically, we have presidential portraits. So just something to keep in mind as we're going through these pieces to know, what do you like, what do you not like, why or why not? Why is it important? I would say this painting on the right is important because it's the first time an African-American man has painted a portrait for the portrait gallery, and he's painting a portrait of an African-American man. So regardless of how you feel politically, I still think that's an important step in the art world. All right, next photo. All right, so here's just a few more examples of, I wonder how I can move. This is not let me move this over. I'm just gonna shrink this for a minute. I'm just gonna hide the thumbnail. Okay, here we have another example. In this portrait, they're both holding swords. And I just wanna say that Kehinde Wiley doesn't always copy Gilbert Stuart. He copies a lot of artists from art history, and he uses historical references to make his work more prominent and to make it more important. And what I think this is important for one reason, and that is that what I noticed when I went to the Brooklyn Museum and I saw this retrospective of his is that I saw a lot of young people there who wouldn't normally be at an art museum. And what I noticed is that they were learning art history through his paintings, and they were reading and they were understanding that these paintings were references of other historical paintings in history, and that's why it was important. So to me, I think that whether you like these paintings or not, I think it's a historical moment that brings regular people who wouldn't normally be walking around a museum, an art museum, and looking at paintings. It brought people in, it educated people, it made people excited about art who wouldn't normally be excited about art. Unfortunately, we live in a society where art is not taught equally, and no part of education is taught equally depending on what neighborhood you're born in and what neighborhood you grow up in. So by having things like the Studio Museum in Harlem, and by having things like schools and museums in Harlem that are helping bring more art to places like that teach students art and teach kids about the importance of art and teach kids that they can even be in a painting. Like some of these people are really right off the street of Harlem, and they were just walking down the street, and he said, hey, let me take your picture. And then he took paintings of old paintings, and he showed them, and he said, which one do you want to be in? Do you want to be riding this horse? Do you want to be in this Artemisia Gentileschi painting? Do you want to be like this Gilbert Stuart painting? So that's what he was doing. He was bringing art history to the contemporary art world. And by doing that a lot, oopsie, Siri's talking to me. Oh no, okay. So here again, we have two men holding swords. You can see these are both standing poses. You can see the reference here of sort of an old wallpaper, but again, he's done it in a different way. He's bringing the wallpaper on top of the figure, so it's sort of like background meets foreground. There's a lot of floating figures, which I'm not a big fan of floating figures. And these are also very photorealistic, very tight paintings. That's another element in both of these. They're pretty tight. We wouldn't call these impressionistic. We would call these realistic. They're going for as much of a likeness of the person as they can get. If you've never tried to do that and you're an artist, I highly recommend you try doing a portrait of someone you know and try to get as much likeness as you can possibly get. It is really hard, especially when it's someone you know, because we carry all of those elements of emotion with the painting. Sometimes it can be helpful and sometimes it can be hurtful. Ooh, I'm going slow. Okay. He also painted, Gilbert Stuart painted, this is George Washington's cook on the left here. So he did paint a few Native Americans, a few people who were living at the time of color. And so I think that is something very important, that he went out of his way to show these people in their lives and how every element of society was important. I don't know all the details of why he specifically chose to paint George Washington's cook, except for maybe they had a good relationship or a friendship of some sort, but there he is. And then this is another man from Harlem. After this, or actually, I can't say that this one's from Harlem because I'm looking at the pattern on the back. He went to Haiti after he did the New York grouping, and he did a group of people in Haiti after the earthquake. And then since then, he's traveled all over the world and done different people from different parts of the world. And he did a woman series as well. Thank goodness. Don't forget us. Okay, here's the Native American painting that Gilbert Stuart did. And sorry, it's a little bit blurry, but you can see just how powerful these portraits are. And the way that he goes about loose to tight, tighter, 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 and into the jewelry and the neck pieces and the feathering. Every part of this painting is well thought about, and well, I can't really say that because it seems like he just puts a ground of color, or in this case, clouds. It looks like he's outside, and then he puts the portrait right on top. Over here we have another example of just a local person who's now been sort of made famous by this painting. Again, we see the wallpaper or the background flowering. It may have some have to do with the nature of where the piece was created or the ethnicity of the person. And again, you notice that these flowers are coming over the figure. So you have these very strong masculine figures, and then you have these very sort of feminine fleur-de-lis elements going on, design elements that really, I think it is sort of the juxtaposition between the two things that is what's so appealing to the eye just right off the bat, whether you like the painting or not. You're drawn to it because they're so brightly colored and they're so mesmerizing, especially from far away, and they're huge. Huge, massive paintings. Some of these paintings are 30 feet, 40 feet long, and 20 feet high. So he monumentalized regular people living in everyday life. Here we have a woman, and both of these, I saw this one in person actually in the Brooklyn Museum. I went to see his retrospective, and all of these are based off historical paintings. I can't specifically remember which one this is, but again, you can see they both have a style that is very akin to them. It's very easy to pick out a Gilbert Stuart. It's very easy to pick out a Kehinde Wiley. And you can see why. There's a looseness and sort of parts left unfinished, and then there's parts that are more, it's almost like they come to life. Like the figure is alive, but you know it's a painting because of the background. But this figure is literally just living and breathing and pumping air. That's how alive it looks in his ability to capture the person. And then again, like I said before, these elements are very decorative and beautiful to the eye, and they take us in. So one thing I know about Kehinde Wiley is that he has become so famous that he has a crew of people working for him, and it's gotten to the point that we don't know how much of the work is actually his. So I feel like there's a point where you get too famous for your own good, and he's now in the business of pumping out painting after painting after painting. And what he's done is open a huge studio in China, and I think he has them, he won't say, of course, and no one who works for him is allowed to say, everyone's under a contract. But you can probably assume how much of this painting could have been done by someone else. So I feel like you can look at his earlier work and look at his later work and see the difference in where other influence became in. So there's another controversy for you. So you can tell me all about it in an email, whether you think that's okay. I mean, people have done it over time. Warhol had his own warehouse full of people helping making work for him. Jeff Koons has a warehouse full of people making work for him, and they paint parts for him, and he puts them together. I actually had a friend who interviewed for Jeff Koons' factory, and she got to walk through the factory and see how they worked, and they pay pretty well. They pay like $25 an hour, but then you're stuck painting everyone else's paintings. So I don't know, and you don't get to get any credit for it. So Kehinde Wiley gets to sign his name on these pieces, and maybe he only made a few brush strokes on them. I don't know. More controversies all over the place, but this is what we're working with, and in ways I think they're really beautiful and important for society today, and in other ways, you know, they make me a little angry at certain things. This is just another example of someone, a regular average Joe off the street who got to be in this painting. And then over here we have a president, and I don't know which one. I'm sorry. John Adams? No, John Adams is not that one either. Here's the one with the horse. I'll show you the John Adams one is coming up next. So this is taken directly from another painter from art history. Why does Siri keep thinking I'm talking to her? And then here's another portrait. I don't know who this portrait is of either. One thing I think is really beautiful is the way he does hands. If you take a close look at the hands and the way he describes them, they're really gentle and beautiful. Look how delicate these hands are in this painting too. And another thing I notice about Kehinde Wiley's paintings is the figures are often making hand gestures, and I don't know what they mean specifically, but let me see if I can find an example. This is just another sitting example, and here's another portrait. Again, even when he has little parts of hands, they're really delicate. You know, these paintings are mostly, you can tell he spent most of the time in the hands and head and hands. And everything else is to help hold the painting together, but it's not nearly, he hasn't spent as much time as he has in these other parts of the painting. Oh, here's the John Adams painting. And there's a couple of these. And look at this hand holding onto the cane. I think it's just a really nice little gentle moment. I think he often starts on a really dark ground like this, and he sort of sculpts the figure out, like builds it out with building lighter and lighter and lighter on top. I don't know that for sure. That's just my assumption, because when you start on a dark ground and you build a painting up, it sort of has this glowing feeling to it, and I feel like that's what has sort of helps bring some of his work to life. So these are some examples of the paintings that these two gentlemen have done. One in the 1700s, painting royal family, not royal families, presidential families and life and times that were accurate of the times. And Kehinde Wiley has taken from art history, and he's taken, oh my goodness, my phone, it just keeps thinking I'm talking to it. It's the weirdest thing. He's taking from art history, and oh, I lost my train of thought. Taking from art history. Okay, so see these hand gestures? This is what I'm talking about. And I'm not sure exactly what they mean, and I want to do more research on it, but if you want to do more research on it and find out what these hand gestures are, they might be telling another element to the story that I don't know yet. Anyway, so these are regular people living in regular times, so they're both doing the same thing, and they've Kehinde Wiley is taken from art history in order to do This is one of a very famous painting that actually helped launch Gilbert Stuart's career. It's called The Skater. And this is just a lovely painting with a lot of movement, but it's kind of funny to me how it looks like it's still a portrait. Like you could literally crop just the arms and head out, the top part of the figure. Like maybe it started as just a portrait. I don't know. But it seems to me he still puts most of his effort, even though he's put other elements in and he's put in some composition this time. He's got an outdoor scene and other people skating in the background there. He also, you can tell that he's still put a lot more love into the arms and hands and head of the figure rather than more than the legs. And this is even portrayed darker than the rest of the painting. And then over here, we just have another example of a painting by Kehinde Wiley, and doing these sort of royal standing portraits, and the way that they're standing is referencing other paintings from art history. So that is all I have for today. I'm going to unmute everyone, and everyone can speak up if they want to and have any comments that they want to say about this artist. Unmute. Hi, Dwight. Hi, Miguel. I hope not Miguel got your volume working. Did it work out? Got it? Okay. So I'm just going to put this one back up. Let me make sure my screen is still sharing. If you need to leave, you're more than welcome to leave. And if you want to ask any questions or talk to me about these paintings, you're more than welcome. Or if you have any comments or questions at this time, we can talk about that.
Anybody have any comments or questions?
Yeah, let's hear them. Do you love Kehinde Wiley? Do you hate him? Did you hate this portrait of Barack Obama? I don't know.
I like the backgrounds.
I like the background too.
Yeah.
But you can see how it's also, in my opinion, I feel like this is a man who found what worked and then he never left doing that. You know, it's kind of like, yeah, in his face.
Hello.
Okay, we can hear you, whoever's talking on the phone. Anyone else have any comments about these two artists? Our family has I believe that we own a Gilbert Stuart. I'll send it out to you guys. I'll send a picture of it. It's not signed, and we've had it checked out by several people, and it's sort of half and half. Half the people say it is a Gilbert Stuart, and half the people say it's not. It's at my grandma's house, and it is a really beautiful painting, and I do think it's a Gilbert Stuart. I have been to every portrait show of his over the last, I don't know, 4 years. I've seen maybe 3 or 4 different portrait shows of his work, and I've compared it to the painting that we have, and I'm pretty sure that it is a Gilbert Stuart. But it's not signed, so we'll never know for sure. But anyway, I'll send an email with that picture so that everyone can see it, and you can let me know if you think it's a real Gilbert Stuart or not. And if you know anyone who can help find that out, or if you have any specific history on Gilbert Stuart that you'd like to share, I'd love to hear about it. I think he was a really interesting guy, and he got to live a pretty cool life of painting presidential portraits, so that's exciting. Anyway, thank you all for your time. If no one else has any comments, I will just hang up now. And you can make a presidential portrait, which is really interesting. Actually, Joanne, or you can write me about how you feel about these artists, love them or hate them. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I just want to hear how you feel and what you think. And if you think good, bad, wonderful, or need more work, let me know how you feel. All right? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Well done.
Thank you.